Saying about it.
All rise. Honorable Justice Andrew Dean is presiding in special session of the Maine Supreme Judicial Court.
Please be seated. Good afternoon, all. Warm welcome. This is a special session of the Maine Supreme Judicial Court convened for the purpose of hearing memorials to members of the bar who have passed away since our last gatherings. And let me just say at the outset, it is terrific to see you here. This is a turnout force. I know Paul and Hunter were wondering about this, but we have turned out in force, so that is absolutely terrific. This is a tradition of long standing in this county. It existed long before any of us were around. We're continuing it. We hope generations that follow us will continue with the tradition to remember our dear friends. These proceedings here today are being recorded stenographically. Should you wish to have the entire proceeding or portion of it, they can certainly be ordered through the court reporter. And again, we thank the PCBA for lining up for this purpose here today. At this point, I'm going to hand off the proceedings to Hunter Humphrey, who will be the master of ceremonies and organizer for the presenters here today. So before we do that, though, I'd like to, I would say introduce my colleagues at the bench here, but I think you all know them. In the event that you don't, I'm going to ask them to give you a wave. We're joined here today by Honorable Bruce C. Maloney. Did you wave? That's it. Honorable John Lucy, the Honorable Robert Murray Jr., and the Honorable Michael Roberts. I'm delighted to have them join me up here at the bench. Others would have been here, but they are otherwise occupied with their judicial duties. So I believe we are ready to get underway. That being the case, Hunter, I'm going to hand off to you. You take it from here.
May it please the court. We have a long tradition, as Justice Mead has indicated, here in Penobscot County of honoring our deceased colleagues by gathering to remember them. For example, it was right here in Bangor at an event much like this in 1966 that John Ballou quipped that the late Justice Edward Murray could not be kept out of the courthouse and was to within almost a matter of days of his death in his quick way, moving through the courthouse talking, arguing, and taking sharp issue with lawyer and judge alike. And it is good that we pause to remember our colleagues in this manner. That is because, as John Donne noted, no man is an island entire of itself, and the death of any single member of our bar diminishes the association as a whole. So on behalf of the Penobscot County Bar Association, in my capacity as its president, I thank the court for giving the bar this opportunity to honor the memory of several of our recently deceased colleagues. And I'd also like to thank our esteemed colleague, Paul Chaikin, for his tireless efforts to make today's event happen. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce Jordan Kobritz, appearing by Zoom, who will be speaking on behalf of the late Harold Hamilton, a graduate of the University of Maine School of Law, who was admitted to the Maine Bar in 1976.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of Harold. Harold was a true Mainer, born in Augusta, grew up in Stillwater, and graduated from Old Town High School. He also graduated from Elmhurst College in 1973 and the University of Maine School of Law in 1976. He served an internship in the Penobscot County District Attorney's Office in the summer of 1975, which is where we first met. After graduating from law school, he ended private practice with me while also working part-time in the district attorney's office. When I left the practice in 1981, Harold associated first with Paul Zenzian and then with John Logan and George Kerr. In 1979, he married one of his law school classmates, Margaret Kravchuk, better known to her contemporaries as Judge Peggy, who served on the bench in both the state and federal court systems. As for the type of law Harold specialized in, he handled a variety of cases, typical of a small town law firm at the time, although I recall he particularly enjoyed trial work and absolutely detested real estate work. Harold was very cerebral and analytical. He loved to articulate and debate some of the finer points of law, and he was usually convincing, without any bombast and without raising his voice. Daughter Megan was born in 1980, and like her father, she set her own course in life, spending years teaching abroad. After Megan finished college, Harold gave up the traditional legal practice, working from home when so inclined, or not doing much of anything if he didn't feel like it. He handled mostly guardian ad litem work in protective custody cases, in addition to mediations and foreclosure actions. He was actually working remotely before anyone knew what the word meant. It was one of the perks of having a wife who was a public sector employee with great health insurance and a guaranteed pension. To be blunt, Harold essentially retired early in life. Rest assured, he took a fair amount of grief from those of us who knew him. I also want to point out that Harold doted on Peggy, bringing her lunch to the courthouse daily, for example, and was very protective of her. I don't recall either of them complaining about the arrangement. Harold and Peggy were also world travelers, visiting many countries on various continents. Harold loved, although he was perpetually frustrated by, the Red Sox. The last time I saw him, the issue of the day was Mookie Betts' best position in the Boston batting order. He couldn't fathom why Cora batted him leadoff, arguing that the Red Sox should drop him lower in the lineup where he could drive in more runs. His opinion didn't waver when 6 weeks later, the Sox won their 4th World Series in 15 years, with Betts batting leadoff, of course. Harold enjoyed attending games at Fenway Park with a group of fellow attorneys. Gene Bollia, Marvin Glazier, Paul Chaikin, me, Mike Pagnozzi. I know Mike Roberts joined the group later, and I'm sure there are others who I'm unaware of. In addition to his friends in the Red Sox group, Harold and Peggy were close to the Kaminskis, Norman and Susan, and also George Kerr. He also served on the board of the Atrium House in Bangor with Marvin. Harold was a highly proficient chess player, at one time holding a ranking of some sort. I know nothing of the sport, so I don't recall exactly what that entailed. You might call Harold a bit nerdy by today's standards, although I don't recall using that word back in the day. I mean that in a very complimentary sense. He came across as a bit different, marching to the beat of his own drummer, stubborn and determined to do things his way, characteristics I always admired in him. He also had a dry, understated sense of humor that could surface at any moment. Harold was friendly with everyone and never judgmental of anyone. He was always thinking of others less fortunate than himself. I think it's fair to say he embraced the concept of DEI before the acronym was ever coined. Those of us who knew Harold remember an intelligent, kind, and honest person, a loving husband and father, and a human being who made the world a better place while he was with us. No one had a better partner or friend. He is sorely missed. I want to thank you again for giving me the opportunity to say a few words about Harold. It is very much appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Kobritz. Next, we have a pre-recorded video message from Judge Louis Kornreich, speaking on behalf of the late Judge James Goodman and the late Michael Goodman. Judge James Goodman was a graduate of the Boston University School of Law and was admitted to the Maine Bar in 1961. And Michael Goodman was a graduate of the Boston College School of Law and was admitted to the Maine Bar in 1968. So if you'd play the video from Judge Kornreich, please. Thank you.
May it please the court, I would like to thank the Penobscot County Memorial Committee and Paul Chaikin for giving me the honor of saying a few words about my dear friends Mike and Jim Goodman of blessed memory. In 1975, I arrived in Bangor to join the firm of Goodman and Goodman as a new associate. At the time, they had offices in the Eastern Trust Building. Soon thereafter, we moved to newly renovated space on Main Street above the Northern National Bank. Jim was the senior partner. He was just under 40 at the time. Mike was several years younger and the junior partner. They had another associate named Peter Beckerman when I joined the firm. Jim concentrated in commercial matters. Mike and Peter engaged in the general practice of law. I was to assist Jim in building his growing corporate reorganization practice.
Okay, thank you so much.
Peter left within a few years, and we became the firm of Goodman, Goodman and Kornreich. Mike maintained the general practice. Jim and I became the first bankruptcy boutique in northern New England. We never called it that because we couldn't spell boutique. Our practice continued to grow beyond Bangor. Jim and I spent time in Portland, Boston, New York, and beyond. Mike maintained the practice in Bangor. In 1982, Jim went on the federal bankruptcy bench. Michael and I remained together for a bit until I joined Gross, Minsky, Mogul, and Single. Michael continued as a sole practitioner until retirement. Jim and Mike were each in their own way representatives of the Penobscot County Bar, which was known then, as it is now, as being competent and collegial. Jim became chief judge and a visiting judge in New York, Puerto Rico, and many other jurisdictions. He presided over many of the most complex reorganization cases in the country. Upon retirement from the bench, Jim went into private practice with a major firm in New York City and continued to make an impact in bankruptcy law. Michael remained in general practice in Bangor. In his quiet way, he served our community with dignity. These two brothers were different in personality and appearance, but they shared many fine qualities which may be attributed to their upbringing in Bangor. Jim and his wife Marge and Mike and his wife Bunny raised beautiful, talented children, and each brother lived to see wonderful grandchildren. Mike and Jim were each avid hobbyists. Michael was an accomplished photographer in the era of film. His work shows a sensitivity and understanding of the human condition. I also think his photography was a release from the intensity of law practice. Michael was also an outdoorsman. He knew every trail on Mount Desert Island and had hiked throughout our region. Jim was a Finnish carpenter and machinist. When I met him, he was restoring antique Morgan automobiles piece by piece in the shop behind his home. Both brothers were readers and loved music and the creative arts. We often equate success in the law with significant cases or ascension to the bench. This would be true for Jim, of course. But we also know that many lawyers find success in the measured exposition of competency and kindness in everyday practice. This was Michael. So it is with sadness and joy that we remember Mike and Jim as true representatives of the Penobscot County Bar. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Judge Kornreich for sharing that. Next, I'd like to introduce retired Maine Supreme Court Justice Warren Silver, who is joining us by Zoom video link. He will be speaking on behalf of the late Maine Superior Court Justice Kevin Cuddy. Justice Cuddy, a graduate of Suffolk University School of Law, was admitted to the Maine Bar in 1973. Justice Silver.
Thank you, Hunter. First of all, it's a pleasure to appear in this courtroom today, and may it please the court, I would like to speak about a friend of mine, Kevin Cuddy. And as you've heard about the other members of the bar, Penobscot County Bar today, Kevin is another outstanding member of our bar. Kevin passed away on April 23rd, 2019, and he left his loving wife, Carol, and his sons, Matthew, Scott, and Kevin. He also left two stepchildren, Michael and Catherine Kelly. He was also survived by two brothers, Charles and Robert, who were lawyers as well. So strong lawyer genes in that family. Kevin came to Maine in the early 70s as an assistant U.S. attorney. And when he was an assistant U.S. attorney in Maine, there was the U.S. attorney, Peter Mills, and two assistants, Kevin and another one. The other one did primarily tax work. Today, we have, interesting fact, 26 assistant U.S. attorneys and one U.S. attorney. So Kevin, with a population of about 900,000 people and one other person, handled all cases in Maine, all federal cases. And today we have 26 doing his work. Kevin became a very distinguished trial lawyer, primarily in the civil area. And he worked at Mitchell and Stearns in Maine, which is one of our former firms, which had John Ballou in it, who was mentioned earlier today, and Tom Needham, who will be discussed later. And Kevin worked for many years doing defense, insurance defense on the civil side for Mitchell and Stearns. In 1984, he and Sam Lanham started Cuddy and Lanham, which also became a very prominent Maine firm. And he continued to specialize in insurance defense and did a lot of workers' comp insurance defense. In 2007, Kevin was asked by Governor John Baldacci to be on the Superior Court, and he served from 2007 to 2014 on the Superior Court during that period. Kevin, after his service on the court, went to work as a volunteer for the Legal Services for the Elderly. And he was a volunteer, but did very meaningful work for the Legal Services for the Elderly. And that's a theme of Kevin's life. He did a lot of public service. He was the president of the Maine Trial Lawyers Association. He did mentoring for the Board of Overseers of the Bar for lawyers who needed mentoring. He was on the board of directors of Wellspring. He was on the Town of Holden Board of Appeals. He became president of the Holden Land Trust. He was a guy who volunteered and loved to do public service. And as I look at Kevin's life and look at what he did in our bar, I come away with these qualities. Kevin had a very strong moral compass. He was a very hard worker. He truly believed in public service, and he was dedicated to Penobscot and Aroostook counties. Kevin came to us from New York and became a very strong and Mainer and a believer in Maine and its people. Kevin, when he was a Superior Court justice, would volunteer for any assignment of any kind. He was one of the hardest working justices and lawyers I know. He was a type of person who he was a type of person you could rely on to do anything, and his word was his bond. And I am very sad that we lost Kevin. Very happy to speak about him today, and have very wonderful memories of him. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice Silver. And next, I'd like to introduce the Honorable Joseph Baldacci, who will be speaking on behalf of the late James Davitt, a graduate of Georgetown University School of Law, who was admitted to the Maine Bar in 1967.
Good afternoon. May it please the court. I first want to thank Hunter and Paul Shaken for organizing this, as well as your honors for having this. This is a very important ceremony, one that's well appreciated by the bar, and it's important for us to do this. I also want to recognize Jim Davitt's family, who's here, his daughter Claire, his partner Mary Louise, and friends who are also here. The first thing that should be said about Jim Davitt is that he was a class act. And I mean that in the terms that whatever challenges that came to him, he would handle with grace and humor and intelligence. He was very calm most of the time. But he had much wisdom, at least for those of us who were younger, he had much wisdom and much humor. He would regularly humor me during his 2 years in Augusta about how humorous his experiences there were, which encouraged me to follow in his footsteps. But I want to say, Jim, many people don't realize how much public service was a part of his life and part of his legacy. He served as a captain in the U.S. Army in Vietnam, for which he received a Bronze Star. On his return in 1970, he practiced law in Maryland and DC. His family relocated to Maine in 1990 so that his wife, Dr. Mary Kate Davitt, could create a state-of-the-art neonatal hospital unit at EMMC for infants and their parents. I just want to say my daughter, Olivia, spent 28 days in that neonatal unit. So obviously, I'm turned to go. Jim was admitted to the Maine Bar. The family purchased a farm, excuse me, on the Hudson Road in Bangor, where they were living when Mary Kate passed away in 1997. In 1994, Jim accepted a faculty position in the Justice Studies program at UMA Bangor. A former amateur actor, which I would have loved to have seen those performances. His lectures were very popular. He was an active member of the faculty senate, a generous and available advisor to students, and he retired as a tenured professor. In 2002, Jim married his colleague and friend, Mary Lewis. Jim spent a great deal of time and energy renovating the Hudson Road home, and together with Mary Lewis opened Bangor's first bed and breakfast, None Such Farm B&B. He was an indefatigable community activist as a member of the Board of Visitors of Mountain View Correctional Center, his parish councils, the Maine People's Alliance, the Maine Education Association. He was elected to represent Hamden in the Maine House in 2014, where he served on the Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee. He was chosen as the state of Maine legislative representative to the National Conference of State Legislatures Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee. He served on the Hamden Planning Board and was a member of the Hamden Historical Society. He was predeceased by his daughter, Mara, and his wife, Dr. Mary Kate Davitt. Jim is survived by his daughter, Claire Davitt of Bangor, his son, Brian Davitt of Worcester, his wife, Mary Louise Davitt of Hamden, stepchildren, Catherine Lee, Travis Kerr, Margaret Davitt, and Kathleen Koch. Jim left a legacy of kindness, of intelligence, of public service that is an honor to our community and to our state. And he passed that legacy on to his daughter, who has served us well as mayor of Bangor and as city councilor. And I look forward to that legacy of kindness and compassion and intelligence to continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Baldacci. Next, Alice Clifford of the District Attorney's Office will be speaking on behalf of the late Susie Pope, a graduate of the Massachusetts School of Law, who was admitted to the Maine Bar in 2005.
May it please the court. I have been asked to talk about Susie Pope and how she made practicing law better. She not only made practicing law better, she also made life better. And I will not apologize for crying because I am an unapologetic crier. She was a truly remarkable woman and unique woman and attorney. And ask anyone who knew Susie, and I'm sure you will hear some fabulous story. She was deeply compassionate, especially when it came to victims who were unable to speak for themselves. For example, there was an animal cruelty case where a dog, Mickey, had been abused so badly it could not stand or walk. Susie took the dog without a court order, without the court terminating the rights of the owner, and brought the dog down to Scarborough, where a specialist operated on that dog. She then took the dog home and made a special homemade sling, and painstakingly, over a very long course of time, was able to rehab that dog so the dog was able to stand and finally walk. And she found Mickey a new home. She also found a baby chickmunk and nursed it back to health. So healthy that I met that chickmunk when it was perched on Susie's shoulder and she was hand feeding it in our office. Susie brought her own brand of energy to her job, the likes of which I have not seen before nor since. Susie had a shoplifting jury trial, and Susie went to Hannaford and bought 2 bags of groceries. Every last item that person had taken without paying for, just to show the jury exactly what was taken, how much was taken, and what it looked like. Or the time when she had a case against one of operating without a license or operating after suspension against one of our famous sovereign citizens. And after he left the courthouse, Susie saw him get in his car and drive off. Susie not only enlisted another ADA to become a witness and to follow this person, and as they did, she called the police, and they did not leave until the police arrived and stopped that car. Susie was a print journalist before she became an attorney, and Susie wrote extremely well. She was our appellate attorney, and as such, wrote our briefs. She would stay till the wee hours of the morning writing these briefs. And once, she didn't go home at all. When I came in the next morning, she was wearing the same clothes she wore the day before, because she had been there for 24 hours and then continued to work that day. Susie had an unerring sense of right and wrong. If Susie felt a wrong needed to be righted, she was like a dog with a bone. There was no separating them. Susie's house was broken into. Susie did not need the police. She was her own private investigator, victim witness advocate, and prosecutor. As I said before, Susie had many careers and interests before she became an attorney. She was a pilot, a print journalist, a mother of 3 wonderful children, a marathon runner, among other things. Susie and her husband bought a boat and moored it in Penobscot River. And Susie was just not satisfied with owning a boat. She then decided to get her captain's license through the Coast Guard, which she did. And then at noontime, she would go down to the river, change into her bathing suit, and swim in the Penobscot River to her boat, and for the duration of the summer. Susie was a determined woman, and an illustration of this, she bought a house without even talking to her husband about it. And she decided to renovate this house herself. Eventually, Gary did find out about the house and they renovated it together. But Susie did a lot of the renovations herself. She learned how to wire a house, she learned how to blow insulation, how to finish floors, everything, except they did have to pay someone to put the furnace in. When Susie first moved to Bangor, she did not really know anyone except her husband. And Susie was always so welcoming and friendly. I was reminded just last night that she and Gary would have a solstice bonfire every year and invite anyone and everyone. And what a wonderful event that was. My children look forward to it every year. Susie was a talented cook and baker. She made an incredible salsa, almost by the gallon, and brought it into our office, and it was gone within an hour. Susie also made a Irish soda bread. And Susie told me that she got this recipe from an Irish gentleman that she met in an Irish bar. And during the time when they were talking, he gave her this recipe. And not only did he write the recipe out for her, he wrote a picture of what this soda bread would look like and the placement of the caraway seeds where they should be. And when she gave me the recipe, she did the same. And if anybody here wants recipes for either the salsa or the Irish soda bread, I'll be happy to share. Susie eventually left the Penobscot District Attorney's Office and moved down to the York County District Attorney's Office, so she could be closer to her parents who lived in Massachusetts and help care for them. When Susie moved down, she bought another condemned house in Sanford, and she renovated that house as well. This time, she did not have any running water for a very long time while she was renovating that house. And unfortunately, Susie was diagnosed with glioblastoma, a very serious form of brain cancer. And the cancer did not know who it picked a fight with. Susie met cancer head on, like everything else she did in her life. She had a number of surgeries and overcame all odds. She was part of a clinical trial, and at the time of her death, she was the only person left alive in that clinical trial. And at the time of her death, there was no sign of that cancer. Susie had incredible energy. She became a volunteer usher for the Sanford Mainers when she moved down to York County. And the Sanford Mainers is a summer baseball league for promising college players. And Susie would usher after a long day at the office, as well as a long day after her treatments. Susie and her husband Gary died in a tragic car accident. Susie brought comfort, life, and laughter. To everyone she encountered, and we miss her to this day.
Thank you, Ms. Clifford. And next, we'd like to welcome David Chase, who will be speaking on behalf of the late William McDonald, a graduate of the New England School of Law, who was admitted to the Maine Bar in 1973. David Chase.
Thank you. May it please the court. First, I'd like to start off by thanking Joe and Alice, because I've had the same issues talking about Bill. William Eugene McDonald was born July 24, 1948, Bangor, to a loving mother and a prominent obstetrician here in Bangor. In typical Bill fashion, he would say he was born with a silver spoon in an orifice other than his mouth. He would speak fondly of his days growing up on Grove Street and all of the friendships that he developed growing up there that lasted throughout his life. He attended John Baptist. He went to the University of Maine. While there at age 19, his father passed away at 52. And that had a significant impact on Bill, because in a way that he felt sorry for himself, but he lived his life as if 52 was his date and when his life was going to end. And so he approached life that way, that he was going to get it all in before that date arrived. And I would say that if he didn't achieve it, he was very close to that. After graduating from the University of Maine, he went to the New England School of Law, where he was editor of the Law Review. After graduating in 1973, he started practicing here in Bangor, where he continued to practice until 1998, when a variety of physical impairments forced him to stop practicing. But it didn't force him to stop living. And going back to Bill and the effect of his father, Bill did things his own way. He was an early proponent of the use of paralegals in the practice. And in fact, it prompted a bar complaint from somebody that there was the unauthorized practice of law going on in the office. Whoever that was didn't realize that the areas of Social Security and workers' comp allow that to happen, that people who aren't attorneys to conduct hearings, to do depositions, and Bill recognized the abilities of Ben Holm and Elaine Holland to carry those out more than effectively, which they did for, in Elaine's case, continue to do for many years. In terms of doing things his own way, Bill, well, first of all, I would say Bill, the clients loved Bill, but that's in some ways seemed a little trite. And then I tried to find another word and thought about revered. Wasn't sure about that, and I looked up and it said, well, the synonyms are adore and reverence and worship, which talk about honor and admire and respect, but that revere stresses deference and tenderness. And that's how Bill's clients felt about him. For many years after he stopped practicing, people would come up to me and tell stories and how Bill saved them in many respects. I recall one of our clients, a Vietnam vet, had gotten on a standoff with police and told them that he wouldn't do anything without speaking to Bill McDonald. And so Bill went and talked him out, and without any problems occurring. Bill also, I recall a time when a guardian ad litem had sued Bill personally because they thought he should be responsible for their fees. So Bill went down and I think much to maybe Judge Gunther's chagrin, he allowed him to take the stand and question himself. He prevailed. And as you don't get a chance much to observe people that you practice with when in a courtroom, but I did have an occasion once when Bill was having a slip and fall case in a local large grocery store. And there was a situation where she had fallen on some detergent had fallen on the floor and she had slipped and fell on that with no witnesses. And so Mark Franco, who was on the other side, and Bill really enjoyed his lawyer, but he was on the other side, and he in a little bit of a subtle way suggested, well, nobody saw this happen. And Bill stood up on his cross and said, I've enjoyed this trial up until this point. I enjoyed Mr. Franco, the judge has been wonderful, you people have been wonderful, and it's been a treat until now. And he said, did you hear what he said? He called my client a liar. He said, I don't care if you give her 1 red cent, but do not call her a liar. And he sat down, and he prevailed on that one as well. But the clients did just adore him. Bill is, but there should be no mistake that Bill was happiest on the water. He had many boats that any chance he could get, and worked very hard to do so, to spend as much possible time on the water. Before work, after work, in the middle of work, he was there. And in terms of doing it his own way, many years he would commute from Frenchboro on a daily basis on his boat, year round. And that was just something that he was beyond competent doing, and loved it. I cannot hear the Jimmy Buffett songs of son of a sailor, or changes in attitude, changes in latitude, and not think of Bill. I think they in many ways speak to who he was as a person. Bill is survived by his loving wife, Terry, his children, Brad, who's an attorney who is here with us today, his daughter Whitney, as well as several stepchildren who he also adored. I miss Bill. And this is better for him being part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chase. Next, Phil Buckley will speak on behalf of the late Judge Gene Carter, a graduate of the New York University School of Law, who was admitted to the Maine Bar in 1962. Phil Buckley.
And make the paperclip work. Good afternoon, may it please the court. Distinguished guests, family members, and friends of individuals who we honor here today. I'm probably the only lawyer who's here today with an exhibit. I give you. Gene Carter. I'm all done. My name is Phil Buckley. Certainly I'm privileged to be here today to speak to you about Judge Gene Carter. With us today via Zoom is Judy Carter, Gene's wife of 60 years. In the courtroom today is Judge Carter's son Matthew. Also in the courtroom today is Monica Bigley, who recently was named clerk of the United States Bankruptcy Court and formerly Judge Carter's career law clerk for nearly 15 years. I was Judge Carter's law partner in the late 1970s to early 1980s. We remained friends for over 40 years. I recognize that traditionally, these memorial services stress the accomplishments of people. But in Gene's case, he had notable personal achievements long before his professional achievements. I think it's worthwhile to mention those. Judge Carter was born in Millbridge, November 1st, 1935. In his early family life, the family moved several times from one small coastal town and village to another. In fact, they had moved 13 times before the family finally came to Bangor, where Gene attended Bangor High School and graduated in 1954. He was an honor student each of the 3 years at Bangor High. On graduation, his scholastic achievements were recognized by his receiving several scholarships that enabled him to attend the University of Maine for 4 years. At Maine, he was an outstanding student. He was a member of Phi Beta Kappa, Phi Kappa Phi, and a number of other campus organizations. He graduated from Maine in 1958 with distinction. In addition to maintaining excellent grades in high school and college, he worked a number of part-time jobs, including lobstering, driving a milk truck, delivering milk to houses. And for a while, he was a clerk at a retail store by the name of Alan Lewis, which, by the way, was just across the street, 1 block up. He had a number of other jobs, but those are the highlights. In 1958, he graduated college, and he was awarded a Ruth Tilden full scholarship to New York University Law School. And in 1961, he graduated from NYU with distinction. Following law school, he was selected to be a law clerk to the Honorable J. Spencer Bell, judge of the United States Circuit Court of Appeals for the 4th Circuit in Richmond, Virginia. He also entered the Army Reserves, and served from 1962 to 1968, during which time his rank was elevated from a private recruit to a captain in the JAG Corps. Following the clerkship with Judge Bell, he returned to Bangor, started a private practice, became a well-known trial lawyer. In 1965, he joined attorneys Gerald Rudman and Paul Rudman in the firm of Rudman Carter. In the late 1970s, he was instrumental in the merger of 2 law firms that became Rudman Winchell, Carter and Buckley, today Rudman Winchell. During this time, he was a member of several professional boards and committees, including the Commission on Rules of Civil Procedure, and was its chair from 1976 to 1980. He was also a member of several civic groups, including the Bangor Housing Authority. And he was its chair from 1970 to 1977. In addition to his regular responsibilities for the Housing Authority, he oversaw the construction of a multi-story brick complex, providing housing to the elderly and other qualified tenants. That building still stands today and serves the same type of clients up on the corner of York Street and Hancock Street. On September 15th, 1980, by Governor Brennan's appointment, Judge Carter became the 90th Associate Justice of the Maine Supreme Judicial Court. That time, he was the court's youngest member and the first member to go directly from private practice to the court. Less than 3 years later, on May 26, 1983, Judge Carter was nominated by President Reagan to be the next judge of the United States District Court for the District of Maine to fill the vacancy created when the Honorable Edward T. Janeau assumed senior status. Judge Carter was confirmed by the United States Senate on June 22nd, 1983. He received his commission June 23rd, 1983, and on July 5th, 1983, Judge Carter was sworn in by the Honorable Frank M. Coffin, U.S. Circuit Judge for the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals for the First Circuit. Judge Carter was the Chief Judge of the District Court from 1989 to 1996. During his term of service, he was occasionally invited to sit and consider cases at the United States First Circuit Court of Appeals in Boston. He also heard cases in Puerto Rico. In the 20 years before he took senior status, and for several years thereafter, he managed his court in his style and under his standards. He maintained his docket efficiently and timely. His expectations in case management were clear. You didn't have to ask any questions concerning the process, the trial practice to be followed in his court. He was fair to all parties. He carefully managed his juries, showing members total respect for their role in the trial. He had great regard for the court family, office clerks, secretaries, and his law clerks. He held them in high esteem, and the feeling was mutual. Evidence of that relationship is the fact that two of his career law clerks stayed with him a combined total of 20 years. One accomplishment he was immensely proud of was his participation in the redesign and renovation of the federal courthouse in Portland, now the Edward T. Janeau United States Courthouse. I recall when he invited me to tour the building, how proud he was to point out each and every feature of the building that, excuse me, point out each and every feature of the project where his personal touch enhanced the complex. Judge Carter took senior status on January 2nd, 2003. His service ended November 17, 2021 upon his death, only a few days after his 86th birthday. Judge Carter administered justice with equal rights to the poor and to the rich. By all measures, he faithfully and impartially discharged the duties of his commission and was an outstanding member of the federal judiciary.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley. Next, please welcome Eric Black, who will be speaking on behalf of the late Arthur Greif, a graduate of the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, who was admitted to the Maine Bar in 1982. Eric Black.
Good afternoon. It is my honor to speak to you today on behalf of my former boss, mentor, and friend, Arthur J. Greif, known to most of us simply as AJ. It is hard to sum up in 5 minutes a life that was so full and so rich. For those who want a more comprehensive look at his life and more biographical look at his life, I encourage you to read the obituary that was published this summer and can still be found on the Bangor Daily News website and elsewhere. It's an extraordinary piece of writing. AJ had wide-ranging interests, everything from baseball to literature, politics, he even wrote poetry. Out of all of his hobbies, it might be cycling that was the most important to him. He had tremendous adventures around the world on a bicycle. Those adventures included Patagonia, the Straits of Magellan, New Zealand, Tahiti, Bora Bora, the Japanese Alps, the European Alps, the Canadian Rockies, the Pyrenees, the Andes of Argentina and Chile 3 times, and the mountain stages of some of the most famous European bike races, the Tour de France, the Giro d'Italia, and the Vuelta. Hopefully I pronounced those correctly. He was accompanied on his adventures by his loving wife, Donna, and they were together for 37 years and made many wonderful memories together, both at home and abroad. AJ was a man of self-discipline and great determination. His commitment to cycling was so great that he continued to do it even when he was very sick. He cycled on the day he was admitted to the ER for the final time. And at the end of that day, he completed 2,175 miles in less than the first 5 months of 2022 while battling stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Simply remarkable. While writing that line, I could almost hear him in my ear saying, "If I can do that, Eric, you have no excuse not to go to the gym." As a lawyer, he was a man of natural ability and talents. You know that student in school who never needed to study for a test and could just walk into the exam room and get an A? That was AJ. First and foremost in this profession, he was a trial lawyer. He had something like 200 trials under his belt during the course of his career. Being in front of a jury probably marked the height of his enjoyment in this profession. There were times when I would sit second chair at one of his trials and it simply looked like he was out there just having fun, giving an impassioned speech before a jury in a closing argument, or making a witness for the opposing party squirm on cross-examination, all the while gears turning in his head, thinking of the best way to apply pressure to the witness and prove his point to the jury. He was fond of quips and historical and literary references. I don't think I ever made it through a trial with him without hearing a quote from Abraham Lincoln or Atticus Finch. His clients often had little to no power. They were often people who had been hurt or had been recently fired, and he approached their cases with extraordinary empathy and compassion. There was nothing he loved more in this profession than advocating for the powerless. Injustices, big or small, he sought to stamp every one of them out. Sometimes taking cases pro bono just because the nature of the case had gotten under his skin a little bit and he felt that a wrong needed to be corrected. He was not one to let things go, and he would follow a trial in a case all the way to the very end. He was absolutely tenacious. He once tried a case 3 times that kept going up on appeal and being sent back down. And he eventually got the result that he wanted for his client. He could be a challenging opponent. And if you were opposing counsel in any of his cases, it may be that your memories of AJ might be not quite as fond as my memories of AJ. But I want you to know that his tenacity and his zealous advocacy for his clients came from a place of genuine belief in the cause for which he was advocating. It wasn't an act or a performance. He was a true believer. I've seen him tear up slightly during closing arguments before juries, and his passion for the case didn't die down behind the scenes, even when no one was watching. My former professor in law school was fond of saying that law is a lawyer-driven process. And indeed, AJ moved the law forward, helping to create new precedents in this state. There are lots of employers in this state that have better HR policies in place after having a run-in with AJ. If you're a pregnant patient who's suffering from complications, you're less likely to be turned away from the Maine ER because of his advocacy. He helped to make our society more just and our world a better place, a little bit at a time. And our community is better as a result of AJ's practice of law in this state. It has been an honor to speak to you today about the life of Arthur J. Greif, a life that touched and improved so many others. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Black. Next, Michael Griffin will speak on behalf of the late Carrie Clark Jordan, a graduate of the Franklin Pierce Law Center who was admitted to the Maine Bar in 1988. Michael Griffin.
May it please the court. It's difficult to encapsulate in 5 minutes the essence of Carrie Clark Jordan, who left us on July 10th, 2022, after 63 years on this earth. She loved the laughter with Bruce, her daughter Eve, and her son Evan. Grandchildren, siblings, their families, and her long life friends. She loved Mount Katahdin. She loved her few trips to Italy. Wine, garden, and good food. I could talk a long while about her accomplishments as an attorney. In the latter part of the 1980s, when she's admitted right to this Penobscot County Bar Association, she's greeted by a colleague who suggested that she should concentrate on motherhood, and her analysis of a tricky UCC priority issue was flawed. Carrie simply shook her head in dismay, persevered, won, and then prevailed in the law court. Suffice it to say, she was one sharp, logical mind, and boy, did she know how to use it. As a domestic relations attorney, she was a vigorous advocate of the children. They were first, and then her client. I could talk about her accomplishments before being part of the For Kids' Sake. I could also talk about in the later part of her life, before she died, she was in the Northern Light Health Care Preservation Campaign. She wanted cancer patients to be able to battle cancer without constantly being reminded of their illness by their baldness. But instead, I'm going to talk to you all a bit about some of the memories that Carrie bequeathed me. Like a marriage, a partnership is a finely choreographed dance. There's a give and take, but mostly give. Every day for 33 years, she greets me. When she arrives and when she leaves, she's heading home to her family. Family's first. But when she's in the office, she focuses on the work. Michael, work is work. Get used to it. Throughout her career, the people that Carrie served were more important than ever the legal issues. Her people management skills were flawless. Compromised by Carrie was done very artfully. You didn't realize what you were giving up until after you had finished. She taught that lots of decisions can be made and lots of problems can be solved in meetings on the staircase. Often, Carrie made me think, how could I be so lucky? Kindness and respect governed all of her interactions with others, no matter how difficult and tenacious. Carrie left me many notes on my desk over the years. I heard you had a bad day. Many notes came with little treats. Carrie and I may be the only people in all of Penobscot County who like black licorice and coconut maroons together at the same time. We had a long, meaningful partnership and friendship. And because of her, I'm a better attorney and a better person. And I believe that a lot of you could say the same.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Our final speaker today will be Thomas Johnston, who is here to speak on behalf of the late Thomas Needham. a graduate of the Boston University School of Law, who was admitted to the Maine Bar in 1961. Welcome, Thomas Johnston.
Thank you. May it please the court. My name is Thomas Johnston. I am a retired member of the Maine Bar. And today I'd like to speak on behalf of Thomas E. Needham, who passed away on August 2nd, 2022. He lived a full life of 87 years. He was born in 1935, raised in Orono, where he attended Orono High School. In 1957, he graduated from Bowdoin College, and throughout his life, he remained a loyal son of Bowdoin. Bowdoin gave him the opportunity through a grant to attend law school, and he went to Boston University Law School, graduating in 1963. Tom's father, John Needham, was an attorney in Old Town, and his son would follow him into the practice of law. When Tom graduated from Boston University Law School, he returned to the Bangor area and was admitted to the Maine Bar. In 1963, Carol Coney and Tom married, and they had 3 children that gave them great joy: Amy, Susie, and Tom, who are still in New England. Tom concentrated most of his 52 years of law practice in the quiet side of the law, the transactional side of real estate, probate, and commercial law. He was part of several law firms that formed and reformed because of retirements and appointments to the bench. Most recently, he practiced with Mafiatis, Promise, and Kaminsky. I don't think my practice of law and Tom's practice crossed paths, as we had different focuses, but perhaps that made our friendship a lot easier. I came to know Tom first when I came to town to work for the city of Bangor. He was a city councilor and mayor at the time of Bangor, and along with Bob Miller, he spent some time educating me, a green and recent admittee to the bar, of the realities of public service and local politics. Perhaps it was his example, and perhaps it came from that of earlier generations, was that practicing law also meant that you had an obligation to the community, an obligation to give back. Tom embraced this obligation, and along with his service on the Bangor City Council, Tom became involved in our community organizations. He was on the board of the YMCA, of St. Joseph Hospital, the Bangor Planning Board, and the Maine Guarantee Authority. In 1984, he and Linda Clive organized, raised funds, and managed the sesquicentennial celebration of Bangor with a River City Festival. And he gave back to his bar by service and leadership positions of the Penobscot County Bar Association and the Maine Bar Association. At some point, Tom Needham and John Ballou, his partner at the time, decided that I should become a member of a singing group, which involved Tom, John, and many others in the community. And they invited me to an evening dinner and singing at the Tarratine Club. It turned out to be a tryout to be part of this group. That turned into a 45-year gig of barbershop singing with Tom Needham and a fortified quartet known as the Landlords. Tom was blessed with a sweet, mellow baritone voice and accurate pitch that stayed with him well into his 80s. And he would like to sing the old songs. If you knew him, you knew he could be a bit of a curmudgeon. As we tried to introduce some doo-wop into our repertoire, it would probably take a year of exposure before he would stop griping about it. He liked to sing the old songs, the ones he sung at Bowdoin, like Dear Old Girl, If I Had My Way, Graceful and Easy, Landlords, and Ride the Chariot. One of the things that Tom enjoyed was our annual sing around at the local nursing homes. Usually we would wind up in the Alzheimer's wing. And if you've been through one of those, you would realize that most of the residents were in a catatonic state, or near catatonic state. But Tom would notice each time we did that the residents would pick up their heads, they would smile, they would clap, they would tap a toe. And you could see that they would remember some of the music of their childhood, some of the music celebrating the season. And that gave Tom great joy. And that was one of the things Tom really liked to do. So if you'll forgive me, my friend Tom, I'd like to close with these few lines. Good night, sweetheart. Well, it's time to go. Good night, sweetheart. Well, it's time to go. I hate to leave you, but I really must say, good night, dear friend. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnston, and thank you all for being here today. We appreciate it very much. Thank you.
And thank you, Hunter, and the Penobscot County Bar Association for sponsoring this event. And special thank you to the speakers for your profound and moving tributes to our dear departed colleagues. It really, their passing is a blessing and inspiration to all of us. It reminds us that we are part of something that existed before we got here. It's going to exist after we're gone. And when we're gone, it'll be our memories that carry on. And because we are part of a group with unique traits of collegiality and professionalism and accomplishment, those are the memories that we will all hopefully leave behind. And I thank you, speakers, for reminding us of that fact. At this point, before we wrap up, I'm going to ask or invite my colleagues at the bench if they have any comments they wish to share with the assembled group, and I'll start with Judge Roberts. Anything you wish to say to the assembled group here?
I don't have much to say. I hadn't been prepared that we were going to be asked to speak.
That was planned.
Yeah. I would be the junior member of the bench, so I get to go first. I want to thank everyone who spoke and thank you, Justice Mead, for putting this together. I remember many, if not all, of the folks that we've remembered today well, and it's nice to be able to think about them, think about the other folks that we see picture around the courtroom. I do appreciate this event.
Thank you. Judge Lucy?
I would echo all of that. It's nice to see so many of you here. It's nice to reflect and remember on so many of these people that I think I share memories of with a lot of you. And I appreciated hearing from speakers and reflecting on the impact of what so many of these good people have meant to our community. And thank you all for being here to be part of this today.
Justice Maloney? I'm sorry. It was Barnett, Maloney. Alphabetical.
I have nothing to add, only words of thanks. So many wonderful friends who were memorialized, other wonderful friends who spoke about them. So many of you who are here. Thank you very much.
And Justice Murray.
Thank you, Justice Mead. Let me add my thanks as well to Paul and Hunter especially, but I thank all of you for being here. It is right that you are here. It gives us an opportunity that we don't often give ourselves, which is the opportunity to gather, to recognize, to appreciate each other and those who have gone before us. I'm struck by sitting here listening, what a privilege it is for all of us, and it has been for me, to hear our colleagues' stories. To learn about our colleagues' stories, some that we may not have never heard before. And it's important, I think, for us to remember that their histories are our histories. What they have done, especially here in this community, made that community, and it makes our community. And we are, I think, and we recognize, I think, by hearing those stories and listening to them again and again, we become part of their legacies. And hopefully that will continue to motivate all of us as we pursue our professional careers as well as our lives. So I very much appreciate, Justice Meade, the opportunity for you to gather us here formally to do this on a regular basis every 5 or so years. It is appropriate that we are here. And as I say, it's a privilege for us to be here.
Thank you. A couple of final thanks, though, giving in private as well as public, but our clerk staff, our technical staff who made this stuff actually work here today. Perfect. We didn't suffer Murphy's Law of technology, which if something can go wrong, would go wrong at the worst possible time. You did a great job. Thank you so much. Thank you to Melissa, our court reporter extraordinaire, who will be available if you wish to order any transcripts. And finally, I'll ask you if you'll help me in thanking the person who was the moving force behind what we're doing here today, the organizer, the carrying the heavy weight. He is the consummate, compassionate humanist that you all know so well, and that is Paul Chaikin. Will you please join me in thanking him? Tom Johnson, I'm tempted to do the tenor part to Goodnight Sweetheart. Thank you very much. Court will be in recess.
All rise, the special session of the Supreme Judicial Court is now in recess. There are.